bright lights, the roaring crowd, the sound of leather hitting flesh. The wrestling ring is where legends are made. But behind the spectacle lies a darker truth. Meet Dawn Marie, a rising star in the wrestling world, whose battle in the ring is only half of her fight. On the surface, she's a fighter, a warrior adored by fans. But beneath the tattoos and the tough exterior lies a woman struggling with the price of fame. In this world where strength and resilience are celebrated, Dawn's greatest opponent may not be another wrestler. It might just be herself. As we dive into her story, we unravel not only the adrenaline-fueled highs of her career, but also the haunting lows that keep her up at night. In the wrestling ring, you can't fake the fight, but it's the battles off the mat that leave the deepest scars. Dawn Marie grew up in a small town. Far from the glitz and glamour of the wrestling world, she would one day conquer. As a child, she was always the underdog, smaller than most. Overlooked and often underestimated, her love for wrestling began at an early age. Not because she wanted the fame, but because it was the one place she felt truly alive. She spent hours in her backyard, practicing moves, learning how to take a fall, and imagining herself in the ring. But the road to wrestling stardom wasn't easy. Dawn's family struggled to make ends meet, and the harsh realities of life often pushed her to the brink. Her father, a former athlete himself, pushed her to be stronger, faster, tougher, yet his demanding nature only drove a wedge between them, leaving her feeling like she could never truly be good enough. As she entered adulthood, wrestling became her escape, her chance to prove to the world and to herself that she was worth something. It wasn't about the titles or the cheers, but about breaking free from the shadows of her past. But behind the glitz and the applause, there were moments of deep vulnerability, moments when the physical pain from the matches would bleed into her personal life, when the isolation of the road, the constant travel, and the relentless pressure took its toll. She was constantly asked to be the fighter, but never allowed to be just Dawn Marie, the woman. That disconnect haunted her, her personal struggles, the pressure to always be perfect, and the toll of the industry shaped her into a complex figure, fierce and determined in the ring, but fragile when no one was watching. The wrestling world had seen her as a persona, but few understood the woman behind the blood, sweat, and bruises. The story of Dawn Marie was still being written, and it was far from the fairy tale many thought it to be. The pressure of constantly living up to the expectations of being the perfect wrestler, the unbreakable star, had begun to erode Dawn Marie's spirit. One night, after a particularly brutal match, Dawn was alone in her locker room, nursing her injuries. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the pain from the match hit her like a tidal wave. Her body was bruised, her mind racing, and her thoughts clouded with self-doubt. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, seeing not a warrior, but a woman who was exhausted, broken, and questioning whether it was all worth it. It was in that moment of vulnerability that the weight of her reality hit hardest. She realized that despite all the fans cheering her name, she had never truly felt seen. They didn't know her. They knew the character, the persona she had carefully built over the years. She wasn't sure if anyone, including herself, could separate Dawn Marie the wrestler from the woman who had dreams, fears, and flaws. Her manager, sensing her growing discontent, pushed for more matches, more media appearances, more of the same grind. He didn't care that she was unraveling, as long as the paycheck kept coming in. But it was a final straw for Dawn. That night, after a grueling match and a media event where she forced a smile through her exhaustion, she found herself at a crossroads. She could either keep pushing, drowning herself in the chaos of the industry, or she could take a stand and reclaim her life. The next day, as she was preparing for her next match, something inside her snapped for the first time in years. She looked at her career and wondered if it was time to walk away. Her mind raced with all the sacrifices she had made for the spotlight, the relationships lost, the piece of her own identity she had surrendered. Could she survive without the ring? Was it even possible to be more than just a fighter they saw on TV? As the bell rang and the crowd roared, Dawn stepped into the ring, not as the champion, not as the star, but as a woman torn between her passion and the cost it had exacted on her soul. Her every move in that match was a reflection of the internal battle she was fighting. Each slam, each pin, each strike, they were no longer just about victory. They were about reclaiming herself, about finding out if she could survive this war within. The match ended, but for the first time in years, Dawn didn't know if she'd won or lost. After the match, Dawn Marie disappeared backstage. Alone in the quiet of the arena, the loud cheers of the crowd still echoed in her ears. But she felt more distant than ever. She could still hear the sounds of the ring, but they now felt hollow. She had fought hard, but the battle was no longer just about winning. It was about figuring out who she truly was outside of the persona that had defined her for so long. Days passed, and Dawn found herself taking time away from the ring, retreating into solitude to reflect. She began to reconnect with the parts of herself she had neglected. The dreams she had as a young girl, not just to fight in the ring, but to live a life filled with meaning, with real connections, and without the constant fear of falling short. For the first time, she allowed herself to heal, not just physically but emotionally. She sought therapy, spoke to old friends, and rekindled relationships she had once pushed aside in pursuit of the spotlight. But it wasn't an easy journey. The industry wasn't quick to forget her, and neither was her own inner critic. But each day, Dawn began to rediscover her purpose, and slowly, she started to realize that she didn't have to be a hero in the ring to be strong. Strength was about knowing when to fight and when to step back, when to protect not just your body, but your mind and soul. Dawn's journey wasn't just a return to the ring, but a return to herself. She didn't need to be the same fighter she was before, and she didn't need to sacrifice her humanity for the fans or the spotlight. She had become something more, a woman who had survived the darkness, emerged stronger, and learned to live for herself, not the persona others had built for her. As the days turned into weeks, Dawn began to focus on what truly mattered. Wrestling would always be a part of her, but it was no longer her whole life. She started using her platform to speak on mental health, to advocate for the well-being of athletes, and to remind others that it's okay to step back, to heal, and to find their own path. Reflection. In the end, the real battle wasn't in the ring, but in the moments when Dawn had to look at herself in the mirror and choose to fight for the woman she wanted to become, not just the fighter they wanted her to be. She had lost so much in her quest for perfection, but in doing so, she had gained something far more precious, her own peace. As Dawn Marie stood outside the arena one last time, the noise from the crowd dimming in the distance, she felt a quiet calm wash over her. The days of relentless pressure and self-doubt were behind her. She didn't need the spotlight to define her anymore. She took a deep breath, the crisp night air filling her lungs, and for the first time in years, smiled without a mask. The woman who walked away from that arena wasn't just a wrestler they cheered for. She was Dawn Marie, a woman who had survived the storm and emerged whole, even if a little scarred. Sometimes, the hardest fight is the one you fight to be yourself, and that's the victory worth fighting for.